Oh, a dog. Well, my wife, another dog. My wife's in bed at the moment. She's not feeling too good, so I've just made her a lovely cup of tea. Well, I lied. The cup of tea's for me. And in our bed is a motorbike frame. Welcome to part 9 of the CB750 restoration. Well, wasn't that a really, really silly thing to do? Putting a motorbike frame in your bed, really? But the point is I wanted to illustrate exactly how spotless this is. It's been fully media blasted and powder coated. Shane at Soda Blast and Ringwood blasted it, and of course Tech Coat in Bayswater were the ones that gave it the powder coating, which is absolutely flawless. Now, I want to show you around this a bit. Needless to say, there's not a single mark in the bed. They taped off the compliance plate. I didn't want that removing and re-riveting. I want it left original. Of course, around where the VIN number is, they've coated it slightly thinner than the rest of the bike, so that is fully legible as well. Down in the steering head, spotless. All around the frame is absolutely spotless. They've taped off those threads for the rear shockers. This is a masterpiece. In fact, the only thing I can see in terms of damage is it's crimped a tiny little bit there where the crash bar was. But the rest of the bike frame is absolutely stunning. As good as or cleaner than new. So although, well, I might be sleeping on the couch now because I put a motorbike frame in our bed, the bed is absolutely spotless. It's no different to what it was before I put it there. So a bit unconventional, but I just thought it'd be good for a bit of a giggle. So the moral of that story is if you're looking at avoiding an argument with your wife, don't stick a bike frame in your bed. It didn't go down too well. So this is part 9. We'll start off, I want to concentrate on paint products, that sort of thing that I've used. I've painted the casing, and I didn't do it with a rail gun, I didn't want to. We start off spending the first maybe 2.5-3 minutes just finishing off the generator, and then we get into this. Now, all this is about the products I've used. I'll go into painting tanks and side covers. That's a different process altogether, and I'll go into that later in the series when we get the tank out, or get a tank, and paint it. And of course I'm using an acrylic product for that. I'm not using jam or enamel, if you like, or 2-pack or anything like that. 2-packs for the professionals only, by the way. So we'll spend a couple of minutes on the generator, and then we'll go into the process of painting this. I've got the rod bolts here somewhere, I think. These are from Germany, and oh my gosh, get out. I can't get the box open. Here we go. These are from Germany, and of course they're the F-type bolts there. So from 2 different suppliers in the United States I've ordered the nuts for these, and from a guy in Western Australia I've ordered the, big end bearings, the main bearings, the primary chains, the primary chain tensioner, the timing chain, a full set of gearbox bearings, and also a seal kit. So that's coming in the next chapter, because I wanted to get this to the point where I can reassemble the whole bottom end. I'm not worried about the top end at the moment, just want to get the bottom end done before I start forgetting, because I'm going to forget. The moment I get off this and start doing work on the XC, a lot of this stuff will sort of escape my mind. So I want to get this done, and I'll do that in the next chapter, which should be only about a week or so. Because all this stuff I've ordered should be here this week. If it's not, it might be a week after. Anyway, hope you enjoy. Well, I've ordered a petcock for this, so I can put the tank back on and call that a day. Now, I've had 1 or 2 comments about, and look, most comments I get are really, really good. I had 1 or 2 sort of questioning whether I knew what I was doing with this. And the thing to remember, this was a will it run video. And so that's just that, it's just will it run. So you're just basically checking for spark, doing a rudimentary clean on a carburetor, chucking some juice in and see if it goes. Just a very quick thing before we get into the CB750 work. If you remember with the generator fuel tab, we had issues with it consistently breaking. The nut split, the shank broke on it, and I've ordered another one for the grand total of $5.90, and that includes postage, so we can take that out. And of course it comes with a lock nut, a washer, which the washer is cupped so the seal will sit in there, And try and work that down the thread a little bit. Whoops. Also comes the strainer. So we can stick that in. It's just an interference fit. And of course we can pop that in now. Very important when you get this sort of thing to stipulate that it is a 10 by 1.25 thread, if that's the case with yours. It's certainly the case with this one. And that has to sit like that, and we can just nip that up. And there we have it. We don't have to over tighten it. But even with a small amount of pressure on the other one, it was just snapping. So that will seal, with any luck, I'm sure it will. And we can refit that, and of course now we have a proper fuel tap. All good. Job done. Right, so let's talk about paint products and what they mean to you as a potential motorcycle painter. I use acrylic stuff, which is nowhere near as good as 2-pack. At the end of the day, anything 2-pack is going to be a better product than single pack. But the reason I do that is I have neighbours to think about. It's all DIY. I don't want to get into trouble with respiratory issues or the law, basically. So what we have here are a few things. A lot of people will paint with a relic can. Now, that's just clear coat, but at the end of the day, be wary of this stuff. It's always enamel, which enamel's fine. Paint and prime, that's dubious. Enamel will stick to pretty much anything, and that's why they've probably written there. I don't think that's got any component in it that would signify it had a primer, but the reason is enamel stuff has incredible adhesion. A lot of people use rattle cans. I don't like them because unless it's clear, you can't see what's in the can. The colour on the top never ever, or is never ever accurate. So that's one way you can go. I prefer to use a gun, a small touch-up gun like this with a door switch thing because it broke. I use that because I can regulate the thickness, I can reduce the paint or thin the paint to exactly how I want it, and of course lay it on as I want it as well. Rattle cans come out nice and smooth, but they're very, very thin, and I think I want something a little bit thicker for this engine. Now, first thing you need is a bottle of prep wash. This hasn't got much in it. That retails at $10.95. I bought that a while ago. Now, if you keep your cans and you go to Milsom's in Fantry Gully, you can fill them up, and that costs about $4 or $5. So there's a full one there. So we don't need to worry about that. You can use specific acrylic thinners or multi-purpose. Acrylic thinners will flow off the gun a little bit better. I just use multi because it's easier. That's virtually empty. Again, you're paying $27 for 4 litres, or you can get a 4 litre can, well, filled up for $16. And so that's the way I like to go. Now, I use an etch primer. We've got bare metal areas on this engine. I want them covered up. I don't want to just put enamel on. It'll stick, it'll be fine, but in a year or two, it's going to start flaking off those areas. It'll adhere to the original paint, but you know what? It's not going to stay there forever. So I like to use an etch primer. Now that's quite thin, that stuff. And the main part of this, or the main ingredient of that, is phosphoric acid, which is the same thing you find in Pour 15 Metal Ready, which is with the stuff you spray on the before you paint. Rust converters, the white milky coloured rust converters, they've got phosphoric acid. Dioxidine's another one, and so they put a little bit in the primer to give it to bite into the metal, to give it a key. So anything bare metal, always etch first, and then of course you can stick your enamel over the top. Now, to buy good quality, when I say good quality, it is a dubious term when you're talking rattle cans, I guess, but when you buy good quality painted rattle cans, around $10 a can, I suppose. This stuff here is $23.95, and you're going to get a whole stack of rattle cans out of that. Now, this is QD, which is quick drying enamel. That's all it is. Now, you can use enamel on engines. People will tell you you can't, but you can, right? I've done it for years and years on engines, and it's never ever lifted. It's only lifted if the area I've painted has had oil or debris left on it. Now, there are two types of enamel. There's QD, which is quick drying, and there's also air dry enamel. And air dry enamel will hold its luster or its sheen a bit longer. Now, when you open these cans, you can also run a nail into the rim and knock a few holes in. So when you pour it into your mixing cup or whatever you're mixing into, it'll drain back into the can and won't fill this area up. Again, people will say, don't do that, it'll dry the can out. Again, BS, it won't. I've got cans of paint 20 years old that are still perfect, and I've always done that to new cans. So with that in mind, a few other products, that's just an old bit of masking tape I've got. Don't use hardware shop masking tape. It's not designed for paint. The gum can release from it on the edges you're painting, and you end up having to clean it off. And the other thing is, it's not designed for some of these chemicals to be used with those. This is the same sort of stuff. It's proper painter's tape. So it's about $2 a roll, nothing to worry about. And of course, if you decide to round the casings, you can use a thin masking. What do you call it? It's like a stripe, a pinstripe type masking tape. That's great for going round little bits and pieces. Again, I just elect to use masking tape and run around it with a blade, and it's never given me any issue. Now, when you start etching a product, it's going to wind up being, oh, I dropped something. It's going to wind up being black like that. There's grey etch and there's black. This is the black one, obviously. When I hit that with enamel, that is not going to come off. It's really, really good. So that's the bottom, the sump, if you like, for the 750 engine. So, look, there's a few things. With painting, always seek advice from a qualified professional. I am a qualified mechanic. I'm also a qualified electronics technician, but I am not a qualified painter. So always make sure you get that advice from the right people. This is what I've learned over the years. I use enamel for acrylic for everything. If it's bodywork, that sort of stuff. Enamel's great for brackets and bits and pieces on engines. In this case, I'm going to do the whole engine with it, and of course, I've done other engines as well, and I'll show you those now. This is a 351 Windsor, and I overhauled this engine a few years ago, and it's painted in QD enamel. Now, these things get bloody hot too, particularly around the cylinder heads, of course. It stood up very, very well. Now, the main disadvantage with QD enamels is they tend to dull off over time. They don't hold that high shine that they do when you first shoot them. Now, that doesn't bother me because I don't want a shiny engine in the bike. Now, here's a Plymouth I'm completing a restoration on, and this is shot in air dry enamel, and it looks very orange. It doesn't look quite as orange in real life. I think it's to do with the lighting, but you can see how high shine it is. It's very, very glossy indeed, and it is actually a better paint, and it will retain that luster a lot longer. Now, I did it like this in this car because this is a sort of a Christine looking car, and I've done it like that because I wanted it to be like that. I didn't want QD with this. I wanted air dry. The other thing with air dry, of course, is it's just that. It's air drying. And so what that means is it takes sort of 24 hours to be properly dry, whereas QD, you can touch it half an hour later. Now, the other thing that's good about the air dry stuff, it's a better paint, of course, and all that sort of stuff, but not just that, you can shoot it on literally a 35 degrees Celsius day, and it's happy. Whereas acrylics and QD enamels, you wouldn't do that. Of course, this is another example of air dry enamel, this engine. I painted this in air dry, and again, it will retain that luster. So in addition to the frame we saw at the beginning of the video, I've also had this powder coated. That's the battery box, and it is perfect. There's a tiny, tiny irregularity in the powder coat down there, which is where the original battery had leaked. But that's perfect. There's nothing wrong with that. I can put those rubber stoppers back in here. There's about 6 of them that go around to sort of support the battery. And also the electrical panel. Now, what's interesting about that is that these parts here, which hold those sort of block connectors, were plastic coated, and the blasting and powder coating didn't affect it. So it's still got that sort of rubbery coat there, in addition to the rest of it, which is absolutely divine work. Also, the centre stand, well, you get the picture. I'm not going to unwrap it, but it's monumentally gorgeous in terms of quality. Now, there are a couple of other bits I need to get done, which I forgot to take in. The side stand, just odds and ends like that, but I can get that done later. I'm not worried about it. And of course, the last few pieces were the battery tray from the XW that had surface rust starting to form on it. Of course, that was blasted and coated, and the one from the XD, which you can see a few dimples in there, but that's not been out of the car since the car was built in 1979, of course. Whoops, that's the little retainer, battery retainer to hold the battery in. Which way does it go? Yeah, it goes like that. So, all up, that was $250, blasted, coated, everything. Well, I'm just sort of cleaning this up and sort of sanding flaky paint off and sort of oxidised aluminium, that sort of stuff. I'm at the stage where I'm about to start masking it up, but before I do, I've got works going on everywhere. I just want to clean these galleries out. And we use these. These are gallery brushes. used for cars. You can see I've used this one on the V8s I've been doing. We've got one for cylinder honing or for cleaning up the cylinders, that sort of thing. I think there's a few small ones down there too. So I think these came from Summit in the United States. So it's a matter of finding which one fits the best down here. And oddly enough, that one that was on the cars does. They hang on a little bit, that's probably a good thing. So I think I'll go with that one. Before I mask it up, I just want to shoot a bit of brake cleaner, and I'll do it in the other half as well. We can just pop some brake cleaner in there. This is the dirty oil, this bit. And it'll clean all those galleries out. And they're fairly clean blocks of it anyway. And I'm just using brake cleaner. You can use Carby Clean. You're just going to make sure there's absolutely no nonsense in there. And they look to have been cleaned quite well from when the engine was washed in that parts cleaner. So that looks to have done that. There's still a bit of muck on the outside of the casing and so forth. I'm using Prepsol, which is just wax and grease remover, but you can use this. This is a dearer way of doing it. That's sort of $13 a can, and this is $4 when you fill it up. It's all very, very clean. I can see right into it. The main one is the main gallery in the other half. So I've got the top half of the engine, of course. I've got to clean all this up. Just get all that sort of peeled paint off, or at least key it right back so we can etch over it. Interestingly, there's still, I mentioned in the other video, can we see down here? Yeah, we can. There's all remnants of the old Honda Bond there. And we can sort of cut that off. Now, Mr. Zagovis on the Hacker Week videos got bagged for putting it around bearings. And you can see here, Honda themselves have actually used it around the bearings. Now, even the smallest quantity, maybe I'll put it that way, even the very minutest of quantity is going to find itself oozing in onto the bearing surface, which isn't a great thing. I would be inclined not to use it there, but for those that were critical of him and his work, Honda did the very same thing. So you can see the sort of evidence of it. They've run onto every machine's surface, all down here. Just even a tiny, tiny bit around those holes with a cotton bud are still going to find, because there's zero clearance there, are still going to find their way in here, you would think. Now, the way to counter that, the one way you could do it, I suppose, is putting it on the bottom of the bolts, of the bearing bolts on the lower case, which means the channel will fill up with old oil, which they had anyway. But also, being slippery, you could torque onto it, if you know what I mean. And then it would dry and seal. So I mean, that's one way I suppose you get away from doing it there. I'd be inclined to run it around the perimeter, maybe a tiny bit onto here, but I'm not going to go into here, even though Honda did that. And you can see, if it's oozed out there that much, it would certainly have oozed out here, the same amount you would think. But obviously it's not done this engine any harm at all. If you look at the bearings are lovely, you know. So I'm not overly concerned about it. We can sort of cross that bridge later when we come to it, but it was interesting to note that. I've got the battery trays back. There's the XW one, lovely. I've ordered from the UK the anti-corrosion mat that sort of sits there. It neutralises sulfuric acid. So I've got the one in the XD, I've got this one. I should have got another 2 battery mats, one for the XC here. That's Poor 15, that was really, really damaged, that one. And I should have got one for that, and also one for the Plymouth as well, because the Plymouth battery sort of sits on the inner guard. Here's the anti-corrosion mat I was talking about. So I've got a nice, yeah, a little bit of damage there, but it doesn't matter, it's powder coated now, it's all good. And this will neutralise any sulfuric. The next battery I get will be a non-sulfuric acid type though. Now you can see here, the aluminium's actually oxidised, where the paint's come off. Here, and particularly these areas here where moisture sat. Now aluminium doesn't rust, of course, it does oxidise and looks pretty unsightly now. There are 3 ways of getting around that. These are painted, these cases are all painted from the factory in silver, which protects it. It gives it a layer of paint, that's all good. The cases on the side for the clutch cover, for example, and the gear change cover and the magneto cover or generator cover are generally polished, and people tend to polish them to a very, very high shine. But of course, over the winter with condensation and so forth, they're going to start to get little white dots all over them, salt and pepper sort of look. And that's what's happened to the carburetors on the MG. They're an SU and I polished the tops and the same thing happened. Now, there are 3 ways you can get around that. You can repolish them, keep repolishing them. There's a guy on YouTube, an older bloke, who's got a GSX 1100, I think, and he just goes into all this polishing stuff that he does. And he, labour of love, I mean, he bought the bike new and it looks absolutely gorgeous. Now, I'm one of these people that probably couldn't be bothered doing that. So there are other ways. If you're going to have polished aluminium, you can use a bit of light machine oil and just wipe over it from time to time. Honda actually painted the cases and clear coated. I'm sure they were clear coated on those polished parts, and that will also protect it. If you do clear them, you have to make sure you get a clear that's going to adhere to polished aluminium. There are special clear coats you can buy. You can just get them in rattle cans, but it will lose a certain amount of luster. It'll still look nice and shiny, but it won't look quite as shiny as freshly polished kit, if you know what I mean. So, take 3. Oh, okay. Oh, there's dirt there. Right, I'm just masking this up, ready to paint it, or at least ready to rub it back. I want all this wrapped up before I start sort of rubbing it back. Look, it's not a show bike, so it's not all that important really, but I bought some new tape, of course. This is the orange one, same sort of deal. It's just a remnant of an old roll. I was going to use this pinstriping tape to sort of get around, but it's easier just to use the regular tape and drop your blade. Hang on. And sort of just run across it. And it'll follow the contour of the casing. Most important to do it this way. I've missed a bit of stuff there. I can get that off later, I'm not worried about that. So this will sort of allow me to do a semi-decent job, because these are painted in such a way that they're sort of, that's blunt. Oh, I've hashed that, but anyway, it doesn't matter. They're painted in such a way that they're sort of painted up to here and then sort of along this strip here. It's quite intricate. Merry Christmas. Around here you can just go scallop it out. This blade's a bit had it though. There's a bit of rag with a bit of tape over it in the gallery. Yeah, just sort of screw it in. And that way, when you paint it, you can get around it. And I'll do a similar thing there, just to box that up. Well, I've got the Chrissy paper on. And I'm just scraping off or sanding off some of the loose sort of feathery paint, flaky paint. Really, you know what? I probably should have had this, what do you call it? Hydroblasted. But at the end of the day, I've got to look at the value of the bike and how much money I put in. This would be quite expensive to hydroblast. This is the 78 model, so it's the very lowest value of the single overhead cam bikes, I should say. So if it was a Sandcar 69 model, you would do it absolutely. Factory colours, factory this, factory that. And do it to a high standard. But, you know, I don't even know if I'm going to keep it or sell it. And none of it's going to affect its performance. I'll just go through, just giving it a bit of a spruce where I see any roughness. Not putting a massive amount of effort into this part of it, really. I'll most likely keep the bike, so it's not going to be a show bike or anything. I just want to get rid of the rough stuff. If I can feel it's rough, like in there, yeah, let's give it a bit of a sand. You can see, just when I wiped it once before, I've just sprayed a little bit of etch on there. That was just rattle can etch. And it's really bitten in. If I dig into the aluminium, I can get it off, obviously. But that's what we want. We don't want something that's going to flake off. Now, that was just a psh with a rattle can, and I stuck my finger in it when I lifted the case up. But that's the sort of adhesion I'm interested in. That'll give it good adhesion and sort of keep anything from flaking off. It's still dirty. I've still got to clean a lot of this off. So the reason it gets it, as I said before, is the edge primer does have a phosphoric acid component in it. Normally I would just paint these together, sort of put 2 bolts in there, and that's perfect masking, but this has a little ear over it, I assume, to stop that popping out. And so I've masked it off and I'll do it separately. It's all dirty in there, I'm going to have to get that out. Rightio, so we're just going to wipe it down with some wax and grease. Some of the stuff will look like dirt, and it's actually aluminium oxide from where I've rubbed it back and everything. Go over where we etched before, give it a nice wipe, make it nice and clean. We've got to also get into the sprocket housing, which is under there. So for this gig we're using a touch-up gun. You can get the etch in a rattle can. My touch-up gun lid's broken, it's very old, So we're going to cover it up with a light switch cover. A bloke from the club, David Morris, gave me a lens cap thing for a Pentax camera that fitted really well, but I can't think what I've done with it. Okay, so this stuff needs to be quite watery. Like that. Pardon me, like that. So I'm just going to get a bit of tape because I am... Where's my tape? What have I done with it? Just stick that around there and I'll plonk some in. So I don't need to reduce this any further. It's already reduced as much as I want it to be. I've only got very light pressure on. I might have to reduce that a bit more actually. Oh, it should be alright. I'm just going round. Just going to dust it on. It's reasonably thick. That's not too bad. Still looks a bit, it's a bit stone sort of, what do you call it? Sandblast in there from sort of the stones that it's run over in its life, or that have been flicked up from the front wheel. But I have probably got this etch a tiny bit too thick. But at this stage, I don't care. I don't think it matters. I think we're pretty much done with this one, in this case. We're going at the other half. And do that too. The main thing is all the bare metal areas are covered. So that's cool. I'm pretty happy with that. Just do there too. The other thing to remember, of course, is these bits here have got to sort of shoot down. We don't want to fill the case up with overspray. And I've forgotten to mask off the head studs. So I might be hitting them with a bit of thinner after I've done this. I'll turn the air off a bit. There we go. And you'll find that, you know, you'll get a beautiful result when the engine's assembled. It'll be absolutely stunning. There's a hair in there. I've also masked off just where the starter drive goes through as well. So I just think a gun is so much better any day of the week than a rattle can. So what we'll do is we'll put these away, and tomorrow we'll put the proper colour on. Here we go. That should be almost done. Have I missed anything over here? Get in there. We're going to focus. Okay, so we've got our cases etch primed. Now we haven't covered all in there, but that doesn't matter. That's the starter motor compartment. Also a little bit sort of still wet up in that area there, but the front of it looks great. The sides look great. The etch priming, of course, will give it that key it needs. You can see we're still wet in some of those areas there. The etch priming will give it... I'll put the light on. Can you see? No, you can't see. Hang on, let me just pop this light on. Might make things a bit easier to see, hey? The etch priming will give that paint something to stick to. Alright, so here's a silver. And silver's pretty hard to judge. It's quite thick. Ugh, needs to be stirred up. And before I do that, I'll just knock a couple of holes in the edge. Probably should have done this before. And if you want to complain or leave comments, don't bother because I don't care. Sounds arrogant, but really, I mean, I've been doing that for years, and there's always someone who says, oh, you shouldn't do that or whatever, but as I said, you know, it's all good. A lot of the metallic components settled at the bottom, so I'm just going to stir this for a moment. And silver's hard to judge. A lot of paints, the true colour doesn't come out until they've dried. That tint sort of starts to dry off. House paints are like that. This is a metallic, and metallics are very hard to judge in the can. But this looks like a pretty good tone. It's not quite as, can you see over here where I'm pointing? It's not quite as bright as that, but that doesn't bother me because I didn't want it too bright. The other thing is I want to give this a fair bit of coverage because I want it to be, sort of have a bit of a sheen to it. That way, if it gets dirty, I can just wipe it off. And for really, really stubborn stuff, a bit of Prep-Sol on a rag, bring it up like new again. So this is going to differ because I'll get these the cylinder block and also the head hydroblasted. So there will be a colour shift, but I really don't care about that. It's not a big deal to me. Do it. You shouldn't shake paint up either, but no, look, I've done that before. It's not a big deal either. But my proper mixing jug has a crack in it, so I can't use. I'm just using a coffee jar. So that's clearly too thick. You can see there. So I'll just reduce it a bit. The rule of thumb with acrylic stuff anyway is 1.5 times. So for every part of paint you got 1.5, it's thinner. This stuff tends to reduce really, really quickly. So like that. That's probably too thin. That's too thin. And I didn't put that much in. So they sort of all thin at a different rate, depending on the sort of paint it is, and also the brand as well. The stuff I used to get from Body Shop was always a lot thicker, so I sort of went further. Bang a bit more in, should be right. Went a bit further than this, but that's probably pretty good there. That's pretty good. I reckon we're right to start with that. So I'm just guessing it as I'm going. It's all good. So we'll load that into the gun and we'll give it a whirl. Touching up around the nooks and crannies. I'll just finish what I'm doing in here, and I'll change the angle of this dog crap all over the ground here. I'm just a bit worried about standing and all that. There goes the compressor. I'll move this over a bit, eh? Give you a better view. There we go. So I want a bit of sheen on here. You can see the metallic gathers, like there's a stripe there. That'll settle out. That's nothing to worry about. So you can just dust it on later if you want to, just to blend it a bit better. And just even the coat out. And we're good to go. Well, we've given it a couple of coats. It's settled back into a beautiful satin finish. We're doing the kid at Christmas time thing and just taking the tape off. And I'm sort of pulling it down so I don't sort of lift any of the paint, because it hasn't gained full adhesion yet because it's still sort of wet. But just sort of pulling it down like that. The other thing, there's a bit of gum there. If those edges aren't perfect like there, it doesn't matter, because that cover, that's the points cover, and it sort of covers that first lip anyhow. So I'm not too worried about that. But the good thing to do is to get this stuff off now, because if the paint dries, you can actually tear it when you're pulling tape off, if it's too much drier than what it is now. And it's like, it ends up being like a light switch on the inside of your house. When you take it off to paint and then you put it back on the wall, next time you take it off it'll lift paint, so you sort of run around it with a razor blade. And you find in a lot of cases that would probably be the case here as well. So I'll just take all this off, and oops, I'll have to clean these studs because I ended up getting a bit of paint on them. There's the little slither of paint I was talking about that I had to mask off between the magneto cover and where the space of the cylinder head is. Just that little bit in there, and also there, but that's the particularly small bit. Oh, that's where the tape is to cover the gallery thing, the intake, oil intake. To cover that up, we can just put that on. I'll take that out and I'll clean that up later. I wasn't worried about that, it was just a good way of stopping paint sort of going down the thread. That looks alright. Except for that, I don't know what that is. Still soft though. No, it doesn't matter. I can live with that. So, until next time, don't drink too much, stay safe, and I'll see you later.